So talk to me a little bit about what you have annotated so far. What book are you annotating?
Great Gatsby.
Oh, yay. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so remember I told you at the beginning that you need to pick like an idea to kind of hook yourself into it. So what idea did you choose?
I don't really know. I don't know.
Okay, no worries. So do you want to focus on character? Do you want to focus on symbol? Or do you want to focus on setting?
What do you think?
For me, with this book, I find that focusing on one character can help sort of ground your thoughts and help you figure out like a bigger theme idea. So if I gave you the choice, if I said you have to pick either Daisy, Gadsby, or Nick, that's our narrator, of those three, who do you want to focus on?
I think Nick.
Okay. So Nick as a narrator stands for the idea of the American dream lens, okay? So kind of like, you know how you're going through life and you're doing your everyday thing, and then something happens that's... It's funny that today, of all days, we're having this conversation. Something happens that's monumental, and suddenly the way that you view the world is different, right? So you're just like, this is my everyday thing. I'm going to school. I'm getting up. I'm doing my sports. I'm, reading my books. I'm getting all my stuff done. And then something changes everything. And the way that you even looked at your past is now different. It's almost like there's like this schism in your life. That's what Nick stands for. So Nick stands for our understanding of the American dream, pre-Great Depression, pre-World War I, pre all of those things, versus now, post-Great Depression, we have this 1920s rise of the economy and everyone's kind of getting out. So if we're looking at annotating the book, there are three things that you want to annotate for, and I use colors. So let me see what your book looks like. Are you using any colors to annotate?
I usually use a pencil to underline and do side notes.
Okay.
And then just a normal highlighter.
Okay. So this is what I would do is if you have access at home, I would choose three colors. Okay. So and they need to be like pretty opposite looking colors.
Okay.
So like something like this.
I usually get one more. Let's use it. That's it.
Awesome. Okay. So then in the front of your book, and I'm going to show you mine after I drop all my pens on my table. On the front of your book, you're going to create kind of like a little key. So like on my book, every time I'm going and I'm highlighting an idea about this thing, it would be this color, right? So if I were you, if I were doing Nick, I would do Nick as like characterization would be like one of your main colors. And then every time you see Nick talk about himself, that would be an example of characterization.
Okay.
And then, and just like I said, like just make like a little, almost like a map key. And then I would do the bigger idea. So when Nick is talking about, remember how in the very beginning of the novel, he's like, not everyone is brought, what's the line? Hang on, I'll find it for you. Because it's a really important line. When I was younger, my dad told me, it's the first line. Yeah, it's the first line. So in my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. And then his father says, whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had. All right. And then later on in the chapter, for me, it's the next page on page 2.
Okay.
It's the very last sentence. It says, I am still a little afraid of missing something if I forget that, as my father snobbishly suggested, and I snobbishly repeat, a sense of fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth. So the first thing that you will notice is that when Nick characterizes himself in that last sentence on page 2, he says about himself that he's snobbish. And that's important because Nick is supposed to represent the idea of like the the hope of the American dream. And being hopeful about something when everything else is going wrong is presumptive. Like, it's idealistic, and some people might consider it being privileged or snobbish if you want. Okay. So when Nick says, I snobbishly say what my father said, he's talking about the idea of morality and decency. So that's something that I would highlight in the characterization color. So Nick is characterizing himself as, I know that I'm being snobbish about this, and I know that I'm being privileged, right? So if I were doing what you're doing, I would highlight it in whatever color you've picked as like, this is the characterization color. So what color did you choose for characterization? Perfect.
Just normal yellow highlight.
Good. So yellow, and then off to the side, I'd probably write in pencil just because it's hard to see yellow highlighter. Just like characterization equals Nick knows he's morally snobbish. And we see that again and again and again. Like the way that he judges Gatsby, the way that he judges Daisy, the way that he judges Wolfsheim in like this really horrible anti-Semitic way. Like, he knows he's a little snobby. And then the other thing is that you want to, so we've got Nick as characterization, and that's the literary element that we're looking at. The other thing is the idea. So Nick is supposed to represent the idea of the American dream. So I'd pick a different color for that one. So what color do you want to do for the American dream? So for blue, if you look at that first sentence, it's actually the second sentence. So whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, I would underline where it says, remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had. I would underline that or highlight it in blue. And then off to the side, I would write American dream equals the idea of advantages. So circle that word in that sentence. So you've highlighted it in blue, but maybe in a different color or in pencil or whatever, circle the word advantages, because that's the word you're really going to sort of focus on. So when we talk about advantages, American dream equals, we automatically, as readers, automatically assume that advantages means monetary advantages. And that's a very American Western mindset. That's it. This whole book is a criticism on the American dream as capitalism. All right. So if we're talking about advantages, what we actually mean is the idea of being like, I've got a house, I've got a roof. Like right now we're in this quarantine. You and I are able to communicate because we've got the advantage of having computers, right? We've got enough money to be able to do this, right? So off to the side, I would highlight that and say American dream equals money. And then the final thing you're going to do is the big thematic idea, right? The big thematic idea is, how does all of this tie into the American literature like movements? So what color are you going to do that one in?
Pink.
Okay, so pink. So again, I would circle that word in pink, and then off to the side, I'd write in pink, American literary movements equals change from morality to money. And once you have that written down, let me know, and I'll explain what that means.
Okay.
So small thing characterization. This is Nick characterizing himself, right? Big idea, the American dream. Advantages equal, once you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and you've done all of the things you're supposed to do, now you've got the American dream. And the American dream, we sort of automatically assume means like a nice house and a car and like success, whatever success is for you, right? I've graduated college and done those things. So we think monetary success, right? This first sentence is actually an instance of irony, in which we find out that what Nick's father meant wasn't money. He meant moral advantages. He meant that there are certain people that are born in this world that are just naturally more moral than other people. But we associate the idea of advantage with money so much so that we automatically assume that that's what he means. And later on in the chapter, we come to find out what his father actually meant was morality. Well, how does that relate to the literary movements? Remember, the founding of this country, the reason people left Great Britain and came over here to the United States was because the old country that they came from was too immoral for them. So they were trying to create a new world that was more moral. So we started out as a nation. The American dream was actually to create a more moral institution. The American dream was not about having money or cars or anything like that. The American dream was about becoming better people as human beings. And that changed, and a lot of people argue that changed specifically during this time period when we had this big dip in the economy and we had this Great Depression. And then after that, we had this rise in very, very fast money. And the idea of the American dream became married, and it went from morality over to money. So as you're going through the novel, this is what I would do. Every time you see an instance of Nick being like characterizing himself in any way, shape, or form, like I realize I'm being this way or I realize I'm being that way, I'd highlight it in yellow. And then every time you see an instance of the idea of the American dream being something having to do with money, I'd highlight that in blue. And then whenever you see Nick talking about other people's morality, I would highlight that in red. And then once you're done, and you're going to go through the book and you're going to do the same thing, whenever you see a page where you've got multiple colors all on the same page, that is a signal to you that the author is making a good argument on that page. And that's something that you really want to focus on.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay, so that's your game plan from here on out. You don't necessarily have to go back and redo some of the previous chapters, but now that you've got a focus, if you go and look at some of those videos that I posted on YouTube about how to sort of navigate the chapters, go through those and use those as your lens. So like when I'm explaining to you, because I go off on feminist critique all the time because that was my minor, so like it is what it is. But listen to it and then like learn from it or dispose of it or whatever. But when I start talking about Marxism and capitalism, that's the idea that the American dream is monetary. That's your blue. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to stop us there because I have talked long enough. What questions do you have for me?
I need some help with knowing what to annotate. I mean, now I have a better idea, but I usually struggle with knowing what are some key points.
So the main thing, when you're going through the chapters, the main thing that you want to look on, because now you've got an actual focus, right? When you see Nick say I, that should be a signal to you. Like you're reading it and it says, I did this or I did that, or I felt this or I felt that. That should be your immediate signal. Right? Because he has a tendency to go off on these like dialogues between the characters, and that may not be that helpful to you. But his judgment of those characters, that's what you're going to focus on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because at first I read stuff, like the advantages, it just slipped by. And then I went back and watched your video and I was like, wait a second.
But that's why I make videos, right? Because
they're really helpful.
You know, it's funny because I had a kid who emailed me and he's like, you know, the minimum page requirement, Gatsby actually doesn't hit it. And I'm like, oh crap, he's right. Because this book, it's a small book, but there's so much in it that of course it doesn't meet the page requirements because it's just like a thick book. Like it's just so much symbolism. So you're not supposed to get it all on the first try. So yeah, absolutely. Watch my videos and let them guide you. Like, don't think, oh, I'm not doing this right because I don't get all this. Like I got a degree in it. So I should hope that I know how to do this at this point, right? So like, if you didn't get that the first time, that's fine. I've read this book 13 times. So of course I get stuff. You're doing it right. You just don't have your legs under you yet. I think having this game plan will help you have your legs under you a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
It helps a lot because now I know what I'm looking for. Because that's what I struggle most. Because I don't really know what I'm looking for.
Sure. And especially the first time you read it, you're reading it for plot. You're like, what happens next, right? You don't think about like, oh, I need to pay attention to the when he uses I. Like, why would you do that? Why would you be like, oh, he's using I here? Well, yeah, it's first person narration.
Yeah, I think it's gonna help a lot.
Good.